the empty bed. I awoke to an unsettling silence, the kind that screams louder than any noise. The other side of the bed was cold, untouched since last night. My wife, Eliza, was gone. Her phone lay on the nightstand, a single voicemail playing on a loop, "Help me, please," in her unmistakable voice. I sat up, heart pounding, as the recording echoed in the dimly lit room. The house felt different, as if the shadows held secrets they weren't telling. I called out for Eliza, but only my voice returned to me, sounding foreign in the stillness. I checked every room, growing more frantic with each empty space. The silence was suffocating, pressing in on me with the weight of the unknown. Returning to our bedroom, I noticed something odd, a faint, sweet scent in the air, like jasmine, Eliza's favorite. It was out of place, a sensory contradiction to the fear that was setting into my bones. I followed the scent trail, which led me to the basement door, slightly ajar. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, calling my name. The basement was a place we seldom ventured, a storage for memories and things we chose to forget. As I descended the creaky stairs, the temperature dropped, and my breath became visible in the air. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that weren't Eliza's. They were beckoning me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I found an old tape recorder on a dusty shelf, its reels spinning, playing the same plea for help. The room spun as I realized the voice wasn't coming from the phone, it was emanating from the recorder. I reached out to stop it, but my hand froze inches away, an invisible force holding me back. The whispers turned into laughter, a sound so chilling it could freeze blood. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that were almost human. I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. I stumbled back upstairs, the laughter following me, a sound that promised I wasn't alone. As I reached the top, the door slammed shut behind me, and the house plunged into darkness. The laughter stopped, replaced by a single, drawn-out whisper, "Stay with us." The air grew colder, and I knew this was only the beginning. The darkness was absolute, a void where even the concept of light seemed a distant memory. My heart raced as I fumbled for the switch, but the laughter had rendered me blind in my own home. "Eliza!" I cried out, but it was a whisper against the storm of voices that now filled the room. I stumbled through the house, each step guided by instinct rather than sight. The air was thick with that jasmine scent, now mixed with something metallic, like blood. I reached the living room, where the faint glow of the streetlights cast ghostly shadows through the windows. That's when I saw it, a figure, silhouetted against the pale light, standing just outside the glass. It was Eliza, or at least, it bore her shape. But something was wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her expression twisted in a silent scream. I stepped closer, my breath fogging the glass, and she vanished, leaving me alone with the night. The phone rang, jolting me from the trance. I answered, and Eliza's voice came through, distant and distorted. "I'm here, but not here," she said. "Find me before it's too late." The line went dead, and the room spun with a vertigo that defied logic. I needed answers. I scoured Eliza's belongings, searching for any clue that could explain her disappearance and these haunting events. In her diary, I found entries that spoke of dreams, visions of another place, a realm where spirits lingered, trapped between worlds. As I read her words, the temperature dropped again, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned to find the room empty, but the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. The whispers returned, now clear and commanding. "Look closer," they urged. I obeyed, drawn to a loose floorboard beneath the rug. As I pried it open, a chill ran up my spine. Inside was a collection of old photographs, pictures of Eliza with people I didn't recognize, all of them with the same hollow eyes. And among them, a map, marked with a location I knew all too well, the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. The whispers guided me through the night, a symphony of voices that seemed to know the way better than I did. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, iron-wrought and twisted, like the fingers of the dead reaching out from their graves. I pushed them open, the sound of metal on metal cutting through the silence. Inside, the moon cast an eerie glow over the tombstones, each one a sentinel standing guard over the long-forgotten. I walked among them, the map clutched in my hand, leading me to an unmarked grave at the far end of the cemetery. The ground here was freshly turned, a stark contrast to the weathered stones around it. I began to dig, the earth yielding to my shovel with every desperate thrust. The whispers grew louder, urging me on, until my shovel hit something solid. A casket. My hands trembled as I cleared the dirt, revealing its aged wood, and with a deep breath, I opened it. To my horror, it was empty. No, not empty. There was something etched into the lid from the inside, a message written in frantic scratches: "Find the truth beneath the lies." The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, and the ground beneath me gave way. I fell into darkness, a void that swallowed me whole. When I landed, it was not on solid ground, but a room lit by a single flickering candle. Eliza was there, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "You found me," she whispered, but her voice was drowned out by the others. The room was filled with spirits, each one trapped in their own torment, their eyes pleading for release. Eliza explained, her voice barely audible over the din, "This place, it's a prison for souls. They can't leave, and now, neither can we." The realization hit me like a physical blow. We were trapped, bound to this place as surely as the spirits that surrounded us. The whispers turned into wails, a lament for the living caught in the realm of the dead. And then, the candle flickered one last time and went out, plunging us into an abyss from which there was no escape. Hey! Subscribe for more scary stories. Story 2. Echoes of Absence. I always believed our house held secrets, but nothing prepared me for the night when the walls themselves began to whisper. It started with a phone call from my husband, his voice distant and hollow, promising he'd be home soon. Yet, as I hung up, a chill ran down my spine. His voice, unmistakable and clear, echoed again, but this time from the closet. The house was old, the kind where every creak and groan told stories of decades past. We had moved in, seeking a fresh start, away from the bustling city life. But as I approached the closet, the air grew colder, and the silence, heavier. I reached for the handle, my heart pounding against my chest, and flung the door open. Nothing but darkness greeted me. I called out, "Is someone there?" No answer. I flicked on the light, half expecting to see my husband hiding, ready to laugh at the prank he pulled. But the closet was empty, save for the coats and boxes we had yet to unpack. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind fueled by the loneliness of the empty house. That night, as I lay in bed waiting for my husband, the silence was broken by a faint whisper. It was his voice again, calling my name, so soft it was almost a sigh. I searched the room, turning on every light, but found no one. The whispers seemed to seep through the walls, enveloping me in a cold embrace. The next day, my husband returned, and I told him about the voices. He laughed it off, attributing it to stress and fatigue. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They called to me, not just my husband's voice now, but others, voices I didn't recognize, all begging for something I couldn't understand. I started to research the history of the house, desperate for answers. What I found chilled me to the bone. The house had been the site of a tragedy long ago, a family lost to a fire, their cries for help unheard. Were these the voices that now reached out from beyond? As the sun set, the whispers returned, a cacophony of desperation and sorrow. I couldn't ignore them any longer. I had to find the source, to uncover the truth hidden within these walls. And so, I ventured into the darkness of the house, following the echoes of those long gone. The whispers guided me through the darkened corridors, a symphony of hushed tones that seemed to emanate from the very soul of the house. With each step, the voices grew clearer, and I could almost feel the presence of those who once called this place home. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and whispered secrets. In the library, the whispers swirled around me like a silent storm. Books lay scattered, their pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. "Who are you?" I asked the empty room. The response came not in words, but in a sudden drop in temperature and the soft sound of a child's giggle. I followed the laughter to the fireplace, where a faded photograph lay on the mantel. A family, smiling, their eyes filled with hope. As I touched the frame, the voices crescendoed, and the room spun. The family's faces twisted in terror, their eyes now pleading. I dropped the photo, and the room stilled, the silence suffocating. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers had names now, calling out to me, begging me to listen. I heard the mother's sobs, the father's desperate pleas, the children's cries cut short. They were trapped, their spirits bound to the house, their stories untold. I decided to confront the voices. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. The answer came in a cold breath on my neck and a single word whispered so close it felt like a kiss: freedom. The days blurred into one another as I searched for a way to help these lost souls. I scoured ancient texts and consulted mediums, each one more eccentric than the last. They spoke of rituals and offerings, of gates between worlds that could be opened, but at a cost. As the moon rose on the night of the ritual, I prepared to face the unknown. The house groaned in protest, the walls themselves alive with anticipation. I began the incantation, the words foreign on my tongue, and the air crackled with energy. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, the spirits gathering, their whispers now deafening. I reached the climax of the ritual, the moment of release. The house shook, the walls bleeding shadows, the voices reaching a crescendo. And then, silence. But as I looked around, triumphant, I realized I was not alone. A figure stood in the doorway, its eyes hollow, its smile wide and terrifying. It was my husband, but not as I knew him. The figure before me, wearing my husband's face, was a grotesque mockery of the man I loved. Its eyes, devoid of warmth, watched me with a hunger that twisted my stomach. "You're not him," I whispered, my voice barely carrying across the room. "You're right," it replied, its voice a distorted echo of my husband's. "But I am because of him. We are the hollow ones, the souls you freed, but we are changed." The air grew thick with malice, and I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The whispers had ceased, replaced by the tangible presence of these hollow ones. They filled the house, their forms flickering in and out of existence like faulty projections. I realized then that the ritual hadn't freed them, it had unleashed them into our world. I backed away, my mind racing for a solution. The house was no longer a sanctuary but a prison. The hollow ones advanced, their movements jerky and unnatural. "What do you want?" I demanded, my back hitting the cold wall. "We want life," the figure with my husband's face hissed. "The life we were denied, the warmth we crave. You will give it to us." Panic set in as I felt their cold fingers brush against my skin, the life seeping out of me with every touch. In a desperate bid for survival, I remembered the photograph, the family that once lived here. I darted towards the fireplace, grabbing the frame. "You were once them," I shouted, holding the photo out like a shield. "Remember who you were." For a moment, the hollow ones paused, their forms flickering more violently. The house shook as if it were about to collapse, the very foundation groaning under the weight of their turmoil. And then, silence. The hollow ones vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness. I collapsed to the floor, the photograph clutched in my trembling hands. The house was silent, too silent. I had stopped the hollow ones, but at what cost? As I sat there, trying to comprehend what had happened, a new whisper caressed my ear, one that froze my blood. "Thank you," it said, not with malice, but with a sorrow that was all too human. It was my husband's true voice, and it was coming from the closet. I turned slowly, dread filling me as I faced the door. What would I find this time? Story 3. The Midnight Message. I had always been a light sleeper, but that night, the silence of my room felt oppressive, like the calm before a storm. My phone buzzed, slicing through the stillness, and I squinted at the screen. The message was from my own number, a photo attached. It was me, asleep in bed. Confusion turned to horror as I noticed the dark figure looming in the corner, its outline barely discernible. The air grew colder, and the shadows in my room seemed to stretch towards me. I tried to convince myself it was a sick prank, but the figure in the photo was unnervingly detailed, its eyes glinting with malice. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a picture, it was a warning. I searched my room, every corner, under the bed, behind curtains, but found nothing. The digital clock read 3:07 a.m., the witching hour, and I couldn't help but feel watched. The figure had no face, no features that I could distinguish, yet I felt its gaze, heavy and intent. The following days were a blur of paranoia. I jumped at shadows, flinched at every notification. My phone became a source of dread, each buzz a potential harbinger of doom. Friends and family said I looked drained, asked if I was sick, but how could I explain the unexplainable? Then came the second message, another photo. This time the figure was closer, its hand reaching out towards the sleeping form of me. I wasn't safe, not even in my own sanctuary. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was getting closer, and I was running out of time. I decided to stay awake, to confront whatever this thing was. As the night deepened, so did the darkness in my room, and I felt the familiar buzz of my phone. With trembling hands, I picked it up, the screen illuminating a new message, "Look behind you." I turned slowly, every horror story I'd ever heard flashing through my mind. There, in the corner, stood the figure, a dark echo of the photo, and as our eyes met, I understood. This wasn't just a ghost, it was a harbinger of my own fears, a manifestation of the darkness within me. The figure before me was a void, an absence of light that seemed to swallow the very air around it. Its presence was suffocating, and I could feel the icy tendrils of fear creeping up my spine. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. It didn't speak, but the room filled with an army of whispers, as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once, all of them just beyond my understanding. The figure pointed at me, and I felt an invisible force grip my heart. It was a message, clear and terrifying. I was marked. I spent the next day researching, poring over ancient texts and online forums, desperate for answers. The figure matched no known entity, but the recurring theme was clear. It was a harbinger of something far worse to come. That night, I set up cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truth. As darkness fell, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. I watched the footage, my breath catching as the figure materialized on screen, its form clearer, more defined. It was no longer just a shadow, it had substance, and it was here for me. I tried to reach out to others who had experienced similar phenomena, but their stories ended abruptly, their fates unknown. I was alone in this, the protagonist of a horror story that had no end in sight. The third message arrived, a video this time. It showed me, sitting in the room, the figure behind me, its hand on my shoulder. But the most terrifying part was my own expression, smiling, as if I was enjoying the company of an old friend. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, the figure in the video turned its head, looking directly at me through the screen. Its mouth moved, and though no sound came out, I understood the message, soon. The video had ended, but its echo haunted me. The figure's silent message, soon, reverberated through my mind, a sinister promise that clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, the protagonist of a story that seemed to have no escape. I scoured my memories, trying to find the origin of this terror. Had I invited it in unknowingly? Was it a punishment for some forgotten sin? The figure was a mystery, an enigma wrapped in darkness, but it felt familiar, like a distorted reflection of myself. The whispers grew louder each night, a symphony of dread that filled my room. I could feel the figure's presence even when I couldn't see it, a constant companion in my solitude. It was toying with me, enjoying the slow unraveling of my sanity. On the fourth night, I received no message, no photo, no video. Instead, the figure appeared in my room, tangible and terrifyingly real. It reached out, and I felt compelled to take its hand. The touch was ice, a chill that spread through my body, and in that moment, I understood, it was a part of me, a manifestation of my deepest fears. I looked into its faceless visage and saw my own eyes staring back. The realization hit me like a wave. The figure was not just a ghost or a demon. It was the embodiment of my own darkness, a creature born from the recesses of my psyche. The whispers stopped, and the figure's hand tightened around mine. It leaned in, and I heard its voice for the first time, a whisper that was both alien and intimately familiar. "It's time," it said, and I felt a pull, a call to join it in the shadows. I stood at the precipice of understanding, the boundary between light and dark. The figure was a part of me, and I had to make a choice. Embrace the darkness or fight for the light within. Story 4. The Forgotten Figure. I always believed my childhood was ordinary, unblemished by the peculiar or the uncanny. That belief shattered the day I found the photograph. It was tucked away behind old clothes and forgotten board games, in a box labeled memories. The image was of my 7th birthday party, a sunny day in our backyard. I remembered the cake, the laughter, the games. But not him, the figure in the shadows. The figure was barely discernible, a smudge against the fence, but undeniably human-shaped. I squinted, trying to recall a forgotten guest, a late arrival perhaps. But memory offered no clues, only a growing unease. The more I stared, the more the figure seemed to stare back, its features obscured, but its presence unsettlingly focused. I asked my parents about the party, about anyone who might have been lurking uninvited. They exchanged puzzled glances, their brows furrowed in concern. "We knew everyone there," my mother said, her voice tinged with worry. "And we would never let a stranger near you kids." My father's agreement was silent but firm, his nod resolute. That night, sleep was elusive. The photograph lay on my nightstand, face down, yet I could feel its presence, like eyes on my back. In the darkness, every creak and groan of the house was a step, every shadow a figure. I was a child again, afraid of the monster under the bed, except the monster was in a picture, and it was real. The following days were a blur of research and dead ends. I scoured yearbooks, social media, public records, anything that might reveal the identity of the figure. But it was as if they didn't exist, except in that single, haunting image. The figure became my obsession, the mystery consuming my thoughts, my dreams. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my room, I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, like leaves rustling. "Find me," it said, and the temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing, no one. The whisper came again, a plea, a command, from everywhere and nowhere. I knew then that the figure was not just a forgotten guest or a trick of the light. It was something else, something that defied explanation. And it was calling to me, from the shadows, from the past. I had to find out why. The whispers didn't stop. They followed me like a shadow, always just out of reach, a murmur in the silence. I tried to ignore them, to focus on the mundane tasks of life, but they were persistent, an undercurrent to every moment. "Find me," they said, a mantra that echoed in the hollows of my mind. I returned to the photograph, studying it under different lights, at different angles. The figure remained unchanged, a sentinel in the background. But now, I noticed something else, a faint outline of something in its hand. Was it a clue? A message? The whispers grew louder, urging me on. My investigation led me to the local library, to dusty archives and yellowed newspapers. I pored over articles, obituaries, anything that might hold a key to the figure's identity. Hours turned into days, and the librarians began to give me curious looks, but I was undeterred. Then, I found it, a small article, tucked away on the back page of an old newspaper. It spoke of a disappearance, a child who had gone missing decades ago, on the very day of my birthday party. The child's name was unimportant, it was the photo that accompanied the article that stole my breath. There, in the background, was the same figure, the same shadowy outline. I felt a chill run down my spine as the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony. "You're close," they hissed, and I shuddered. The library's lights flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move. I was no longer alone. That night, the whispers became voices, distinct and clear. They spoke of secrets, of hidden truths, of a story that needed to be told. They spoke of the figure, of its ties to me, of a bond forged in darkness and silence. I listened, and I understood. The figure was not just a bystander, it was a guardian, a watcher, a keeper of the past. As dawn broke, I knew what I had to do. The figure had chosen me, had led me to this moment. It was time to confront the past, to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. I had to go back to where it all began, to the house I grew up in, to the backyard where the photograph was taken. The whispers guided me back to the old house, now derelict and shrouded in overgrowth. The once vibrant colors were faded, the laughter long silenced. I stepped into the backyard, the scene of the photograph, and felt a weight in the air, a charge that made my skin prickle. As I approached the spot where the figure had stood, the whispers grew urgent. "Here," they said, and I could almost feel a hand on my shoulder, a breath on my neck. I turned, half expecting to see someone, but there was only the empty yard and the ghosts of memories. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and called out, "I'm here. What do you want from me?" The air stilled, the whispers ceased, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a voice, clear and resonant, spoke from the shadows. "Look closer." I opened my eyes and saw it, a faint outline on the fence, not a shadow, but a mark, a message. It was a name and a date, the same as the child who had disappeared. The realization hit me like a wave. The figure was him, the missing child, reaching out across time. The voice spoke again, "Find the truth. Share my story." It was a plea from beyond, a task entrusted to me. I nodded, understanding my role. I was to be the voice for the voiceless, the teller of untold tales. I spent the next days piecing together the story, the tragedy of a child forgotten, a life unlived. The more I uncovered, the more the shadows receded, the whispers softened. I wrote it all down, every detail, and when I was done, I felt a sense of completion, of release. That night, I dreamed of the backyard, of my birthday party, but this time, the figure was not lurking in the shadows. He was there, in the light, smiling, finally at peace. When I awoke, the photograph was gone, and in its place, a new image of the party, with all of us, and no shadows to be seen. The whispers were silent, the task complete, but the chill remained. For in the corner of the new photograph, barely visible, was another figure, another shadow, waiting to be found. The end. Subscribe for more. Thank you.